Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this
morning. Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Good. Are you going to be glad when the election is over?
It's partly, but then the hard stuff happens. Yeah. That's when disappointment happens.
A lot of people, you know, the etiquette is, they're so boring, I don't want them, and I don't care, but they all.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible to ignore them because it does affect everybody.
Sure.
You know, there's so many ups and downs. But we're going to talk one angle on the election and what might come out of it that has to do with, we believe, a lot to do with every American citizen because it has to do something with the budget, where the money is being spent, and when our military personnel is being exposed in other parts of the country that participates not in defense, but in manipulation of our foreign policy and what our empire has to do. So this to me is important, and of course we've wondered along, and you and I have talked about a lot. I wonder what the appointments are going to be like because you know even when he was in office before, you knew personally and knew McGregor well, and tried to get attention on him, and I think the attention was good, and he is a well-known person now. But it's still there's been a few times that President Trump has said and acknowledged that maybe one thing that he didn't do real well, this is unusual for him to say something like that, and I'm not going to say what the words are, but he implied that maybe he didn't vet his appointees like he should have. And we said, yes, we agree with that.
That was, when he was on Rogan, because I think he made a point that was understandable. He said, I got in there and I had this pressure to hire people that were already well known. And being well known in that field means you've been in Washington forever. And if you've been in Washington forever, you're playing the game. So you're not coming in with the mentality of clearing out the swamp, draining the swamp, because you are the swamp. And so he deserves part of the blame for choosing some people that were bad, and he names them himself, and we'll have some clips on it later. But in some way, it's a system that's flawed, that it doesn't produce people of quality who can be sort of named in these positions. Well,
right now, the assumption and all the money is on Trump. He's going to win.
Looks that way.
And I guess one thing that I am convinced of, let's say he is beaten by 2% of the vote or 3%, pretty close, but not a crazy amount. But if he pulls this off with the understanding, even coming from the Democrats, I think that would be very insightful. I think people would come away, and I might be in this category, something is wrong.
Something's fishy,
Denmark, boy, something's going wrong here. So, but we can't complain about that until we find out what happens. But a lot of people are going to be tense today. And in many ways, I make the argument, which is not an overall argument, is I don't get overly involved because no dramatic changes are going to occur. But of course, we get hints and even invited to discuss, cutting the budget and talking about, the Federal Reserve and all, and that's all very, very good. But overall, in my lifetime, ever since I've been watching things, the Fed goes on, printing money goes on, the debt goes on, our empire grows, the war mongering continues. So it is important, and there is a difference, but there's also similarities. But I put that down that the deep state is very powerful, and they influence both sides. No matter who wins, it's going to be hard, if and when Trump wins, for his appointment, say, to the Federal Reserve. He's complained about it, boy, and they don't like anybody messing around with the Federal Reserve, so that there's a lot of hurdles there. But anyway, last night, I had an indirect invitation to maybe join in on the gala had there, and on the winding down, convention for Trump. And I have to admit, I was so glad I wasn't there. Because I'd have had trouble if I was sitting in the audience. Who's going to be the top-notch speaker to wind down this wonderfully run campaign? Who's this is going to be? Oh, Jonathan Turley. Oh, we got somebody else. That would have made me very uneasy, and I don't want to tell anybody what I might have done.
Yeah, well, it was unfortunate, and that's the reason why we, what do we title today's show? Trump, beware of Mike Pompeo and the other neocon snakes in the grass. Because they're there and they're dangerous, and Mike Pompeo was very dangerous, and sadly, as you point out, he closed the event in Pittsburgh. He got a big ovation. Trump gave him a big, very big welcome. And now we're not talking about this to criticize or to attack Trump. Our point is just be careful, because I think he has very good instincts when it comes to these. You know, remember on a recent interview, I forget which one it was, maybe it was Rogan, but it was after Rogan, I guess, when he was talking about Liz Cheney, and he said, yeah, she wants to send everyone to war. Why don't you have her up there with a bunch of guns facing her? You know? And of course, the press misrepresented it as he wanted her shot. He was saying, you're the one pushing wars. Why don't you go out there and face all these guns? Because it's not a walk in the park. So I think he has good anti-war instincts in that respect. However, he still tends to kind of run with the bad crowd. And so here we have a little clip from last night. Here is a minute long of Mike Pompeo, former CIA director for Trump 1, former Secretary of State for Trump 1, and let's hear what he has to say.
And I often get asked, Mike, what was it like? Right, the Washington Post described me as the most loyal cabinet member to Donald J. Trump. I had to remind the president that they did not mean that as a compliment. They asked me, what was it like to serve for President Trump? And I told them, and I've told everyone hundreds of times in these 3.5 years, it was the greatest privilege that Mike Pompeo could ever have. I was proud to be a part of President Trump's team. I talked to him every day for 4 years, first as CIA director and then as Secretary of State. And what I was so proud of is that we understood the greatness of this nation, and we never once apologized for the United States of America. Not once. Now, President Trump's going to secure our southern border. We will bring peace back to the world. We will take down the ring.
No, you got to finish it.
Of fire. We will support our friends in Israel, but he's going to need help to do that.
Yeah, so 3 observations, Dr. Paul. First of all, referring to himself in the third person is odd. You know, that's odd. That's just something weird. The second one is he's obviously sucking up. You know, it was such an honor to serve you, such an honor to serve you. And then the third one, though, which is, it may have passed people's ears undetected, but he said, we're going to take down the ring of fire. That means Iran. That means he's promising war with Iran, and we're going to support Israel, which is meaning that to support Israel's war with Iran. So even in this closing statement, he is saying we're going to bring more war. And you may not notice that if you don't listen closely, but that's what Trump is getting if he hires a Mike Pompeo.
You know, and you can tell he was put in a position of gaining a great endorsement by that crowd and by the television and all these, and this victory that probably they're going to have. They're going to say that's all an endorsement of that foreign policy. And yet we've heard the other side of it by others in the administration. And, you know, I keep thinking about it. The one thing we can give him credit for is if you take the conventional way of measuring intelligence, he does quite well.
He's a smart guy.
First in West Point and all that, but that doesn't automatically give you judgment. I think there's a difference between IQs and how they test it. I don't think you can test, you know, judgment and put everything together. And so I think in part, the one thing that the IQ is very helpful in no matter what you do. So you don't have to, that doesn't define where you're coming from, but it defines a vehicle that makes you more effective. He's very effective, and I first met him when we were in Congress, and you know, and he moved up. His career reminds me a little about George H.W. Bush. You know, he was in, I think he was in the House, and then although I think he ran for Senate and lost, but automatically he had jobs. He was at the UN and CIA. So this guy, you know, he has moved up the ladder, and I predict that. But our suggestion of being cautious will go unobserved. I hate to say it and shouldn't do these predictions, but just as a matter of fact, I think he's on his way, you know, to becoming Secretary of State or
Defense.
So.
The thing is that, you know, Bolton, it's easy to make fun of Bolton. We talked about before the show. I think Bolton's days are behind him. Now, he's going to sit down and write some book or whatever. You know, that's what he does. But Pompeo he still hungers for that game. He wants to be in the game. I don't think Bolton really does. He's got a comfy chair in some think tank somewhere probably. So that makes Pompeo a real danger. And like you say, because he is a very intelligent person. But someone else who we both consider a very intelligent person is Tucker Carlson. And Tucker is definitely supportive of Donald Trump. There's no question about it this time around. But Tucker had some interesting reflections on Mike Pompeo. And it was during an interview, I think on Rogan, where Tucker said he basically got a call and he was warned by Pompeo's people, maybe Pompeo himself, to stay away from the JFK stuff. So let's listen to this. This is interesting because he has some interesting reflections on Mike Pompeo as a person. Let's listen to this clip.
Committed a crime.
Full screen it, please.
He's threatening me. He's in my car. With my dog sitting next to me. I'll never forget this. And I said, are you really saying that to reveal that the U.S. government had a role in the murder of a democratically elected president, to say that out loud, that's the crime? What about the actual crime, which is murdering a president? Like, you're covering up for that, Mike Pompeo.
What did he say to that?
He had no response at all. And so Mike Pompeo is the one who pressed Trump to keep those documents secret. And so it's like, what's crazy to me is not just that Pompeo did that. I think Pompeo is a really sinister person and a criminal. I think that because the facts suggest that. He was caught. Yahoo News, Mike Isikoff wrote a long piece on this several years ago. His employees went to Mike Isikoff and said, hey, Mike Pompeo is plotting to murder Julian Assange, who's never even been charged with a crime in the United States, as CIA director. That's illegal. You're not allowed. Federal employees are not allowed to just kill people they don't like, okay? Just to set the baseline here. So that's who Mike Pompeo is. But he somehow intimidated Trump into not releasing this. Well, okay, that's all bad, right? I think it's criminal behavior.
Interesting, no.
Wow.
Thinks it's criminal behavior, keeping the JFK record secret. And interesting with the Mike Isikoff piece that he talks about, whistleblowers from the CIA came to Isikoff and said, he's plotting to kill Assange. So it came from within the agency.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. I mean, Tucker is great at saying that. You can't just kill people you don't like.
You know, that was so strong, I got to thinking, boy, he better be careful. He's going to lose his income and the people are going to leave him. But I bet his numbers went up when on almost every program. His numbers go up because, you know what it is? It's not that he knows everything, but you know he's telling the truth to the best of his ability. And that's what people are looking for. You know, but most of the people, I think it's 70 or 80%, you know, don't believe the government's story about how JFK was killed.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's a brand new theory of what's happening.
Yeah,
So,
and we should know. But the other thing that was concerning is how, and we don't know exactly how this worked, but he basically said that Mike Pompeo intimidated Trump into not doing that. And I've heard stories that it was that it was Pompeo who was pushing the murder of Soleimani, which really has ignited the Middle East. You know, it's caused a lot of problems in the Middle East, and that was Pompeo's thing, from what I've heard. So it's really bad. But let's listen to another thing. This is sort of we're putting Pompeo on trial, but let's listen to another one, because this is Assange himself describing what happened, describing the attempts to kill him and his family, by the way. Let's do that second to the third one. If we can full screen this one and listen to Assange after getting out of jail in his own words. This is very chilling.
It is now a matter of public record that under Pompeo's explicit direction, the CIA drew up plans to kidnap and to assassinate me within the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and authorized going after my European colleagues, subjecting us to theft, hacking attacks, and the planting of false information. My wife and my infant son were also targeted. A CIA asset was permanently assigned to track my wife, and instructions were given to obtain DNA from my 6-month-old son's nappy. This is the testimony of more than 30 current and former US intelligence officials speaking to the US press, which has been additionally corroborated by records seized in a prosecution brought against some of the CIA agents involved. The CIA's targeting of myself, my family, and my associates through aggressive extrajudicial and extraterritorial means provides a rare insight into how powerful intelligence organizations engage in transnational repression.
Very powerful. His wife and his infant son targeted.
Horrible, horrible.
And remember when we had Assange speak at our conference, and he talked about how Pompeo called him a hostile intelligence, foreign intelligence service and all this. Yeah, really on his radar. So.
You know, what they'd like to do is turn in, they do it all the time, especially in these last few years of seeking the truth. The people who are revealing this, they work real hard to make them the bad guys.
Yeah,
so, and of course, that's the way our government did it. So we have to give the government that finally, acquiesced to letting Assange, go back to Australia, I guess it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we're talking about Pompeo because he seems to have had a pretty large role, particularly in the last part of this campaign. But he's not the only danger. That's why we called it other neocon snakes in the grass, because we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, I guess. Nikki Haley's out there. Tom Cotton is out there. Lindsey Graham, little Marco Rubio's out there. He was introducing, I think, Trump down in Florida. And these are all bad guys,
Yeah.
and gals.
And, let's be thankful that we theoretically have a right to do this, and that we're not going to be, assassinated for it. But more and more people are thinking maybe we shouldn't be complacent. I mean, maybe that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Don't get too complacent about what's going on, because the assassinations of the 60s, I wrote a little pamphlet on that, the 60s, how, the assassinations changed our whole country. Yeah. I think that was a pivoting point, because the CIA and other government agencies was involved with JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King, and others.
Yeah.
And that's because, and most people agree that because they became outspoken on anti-war. Because, in looking at Kennedy and all his speeches, when he was first in office, he was sort of trying to play a balanced game. But the longer he was there, and I think he had announced that, he's, in the next term, he would make sure that they get out of Vietnam.
Yeah. And he also wanted to separate, the CIA separate the intelligence gathering and analysis from the covert action, the covert ops, And that might have been his fatal mistake, And his nephew, RFK Jr., believes that. I mean, he said it on our show, he said it, repeatedly, that he thinks the CIA is responsible for his father's death and his uncle's death. So it would be an interesting thing, because RFK is apparently, at least according to Trump's people, going to have a prominent role if there is a Trump 2.0 administration. So it would be strange to have someone like Pompeo, who's trying to hide the truth, and RFK, who wants the truth to come out about who killed his uncle and his father.
And the people, the large number of people, they're getting hit back and forth and back and forth. It's all politics, the noise they hear.
Yeah.
But there's still a vehicle that we can get information out.
Well, let's not keep talking bad about Mike Pompeo. Let's let Mike Pompeo himself say a couple of words in his defense.
He has a high IQ. He's not going to make a mistake on what he says.
Yeah. Let's let him talk in his own defense here. Let's full screen listen. Let's hear Mr. Pompeo in his own words.
When I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
Anyway, we can.
When I was a cadet,
the applause is the worst part of this. I mean,
because these are cadets. I mean, these are West Point cadets laughing about it. You know, it's very sad. Very sad.
They've been brainwashed.
Yeah. It's terrible. But so hopefully, we'll see what happens. But I wanted to do one other one because this is kind of, I guess, as we move toward a close in this show, this is more of a hopeful thing because this is Trump when he's on with Joe Rogan and admitting that someone like Bolton was a mistake, you know. And so let's listen in his own words, that final clip, if we can put our earpieces in. I think, you know, this is a really good section. You might want to put that in and listen to Trump. This is a good section, I think.
Bolton, or I picked Bolton. He called up. He said, "Don't pick him. Why? He's a bad guy." Now, he wasn't in politics at all. He's in various businesses. He said, "He's a bad guy. He's just, it always works out bad with that guy." I said, "Oh, man, I wish you told me this 2 weeks ago. I already hired him. You know, he's here." And he was right. But he was good in a certain way. He's a nut job. And every time I had to deal with a country, when they saw this whack job standing behind me, they said, "Oh, man, Trump's going to go to war with us." He was with Bush when they went stupidly into the Middle East. They should have never done it. I used to say it as a civilian. Bolton, or I picked Bolton. He called up. He said, "Don't pick him. Why? He's a bad guy." Now, he was...
Who were they talking about?
They're talking about Bolton, yeah.
Oh, Bolton. Yeah, okay.
But, you know, Trump's made an important point. He said Bolton was there when Bush went stupidly into the Middle East. That's a great sentence. But here we have, just last night, Mike Pompeo promising to go back into the Middle East. We're going to take down the Ring of Fire. That means we're going to go to war with Iran. So he's on the verge of making the same mistake. You know, by promoting him.
One thing that goes on, you're not allowed to mention because you're unpatriotic, is that they had a real serious effort of trying to work with the Iranians and have an agreement that they don't build a nuclear weapon. So what did they say this week when they hear this? Yeah. Well, you know, we have the equipment to start it and have it. But I think they know that it's foolhardy and they don't want to, but they just have to, you know, at least pretend they're going to be able to defend themselves. But this is terrible. That's why it's so terrible when we've heard of this thing called non-intervention and stay away from empires and stay away from the military-industrial complex. How beneficial it is. How many problems are solved. Freedoms are protected. The budget is protected, and the biggest thing is less war. And yet we're not, who knows where we'll go from here.
And I think Trump does want less war, and even if it's not because of any sort of moral whatever, he just knows that's really bad politics, just like bad business. You know, he doesn't want it. You know, so we'll see what happens. But, you know, I noticed with interest that Donald Trump Jr. retweeted your column of yesterday. You know, he's done that a couple times, and I think Donald Trump Jr. is a very smart person. I think he's very astute. I think he's really has good political instincts. So maybe Trump will call his son up, and his son will say, "Dad, you know, don't put this guy, don't put the neocons. They're gonna ruin you. They'll ruin you. They'll ruin his presidency."
Maybe we ought to call his son and ask him to come on our program.
I would love to have Donald Trump Jr. on the show. That would be really interesting. Imagine all the things because they were basically kids the first time. You know, they were young, early 20s. I don't know exactly how old he is, but you know, it'd be interesting to do. So anyway, I'll close out by thanking our viewers. Election day, we'll see what happens. I don't know, Dr. Paul, you're going to get a big bottle of whiskey and drink it down tonight. That's probably not a good idea. But anyway, we want to thank you for watching the show. We had really good numbers today, and we really appreciate you coming on to listen to what we had to say. Please hit that thumbs up if you can, or like wherever you're listening to us or watching us, and we'll see you tomorrow. Dr. Paul, up to you.
See, I have trouble to know exactly what my schedule will be because, you know, we do have a biological clock, and somebody came along and they thought they knew more than whoever runs the biological club. And they say, well, now you have to go to bed an hour earlier, an hour later, and get up. And when I was, you know, in college and all, I just lived with it, didn't pay any attention. But now when I think of it, Why are they doing that? It had something to do with World War II, and it's almost sacred. You know, you can't even say, I don't want to have daylight saving times. Oh, and I like to do this and this. So what a shame. But that's just represented an example of interventionism, assuming that people can't work things out. Because the truth is, you know, states could work things out, and the electronics can work things out. And it's not that big. Businesses can adjust, and they do. You know, some people just go to work earlier. Even physicians might adjust their schedules. You know, and I saw patients real early on Saturday mornings because it was more convenient for me. But anyway, it's interventionism by bureaucrats who think they're doing good, never lead to many good things. And then when you multiply that, that's rather minor about daylight savings time. Here he is worrying about daylight savings time. We have to worry about who's building the next nuclear weapon. But I think that you know, that the principle is the most important thing. The people don't, the ones in the Congress, whether they're elected leaders or bureaucrats or whatever, they do not have the authority to do about 99% of what they are. If you say, well, where do you get your authority? They didn't get it from the Constitution, because it was written pretty well, and they weren't given authority to micromanage everything that we do and tell us what time we had to go to bed. So I tell you, it's a menace to have people being micromanaged, and some people were born that way. That they want to micromanage, a lot of them, and I think we heard a few this past week, that people don't know what to do. They don't know how to, they need us to help them, to tell them where to go, and they want to micromanage because people they'll claim are stupid. Well, I'll tell you what, if you have a full understanding of what is going on and an experience of the ramifications of government intervention, I don't know. Maybe other people, maybe there are a lot of people who have a definition of stupidity that doesn't agree with the ones that said, we need to run your life because you all stupid. But anyway, it's a battle that's been going on for a long time. Authoritarianism has been around there. They're always trying to build it. And voluntarism has been available for a long time too. But right now, we've had a lot of authoritarianism. But there's no reason why we can't start shifting that. Maybe this campaign and election might give us that shift, just going in the direction. I know we can't have total voluntarism immediately overnight, but you could have a sudden sudden switch. And when we saw a hint that there might be somebody who's knowledgeable and part of the administration saying, you know what, we better start dealing with this Federal Reserve because they might be the culprit that we should be talking more about. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.